Hello again. Today I'm going to show you how you can draw 6 different flowers with just a few simple steps. All of these flowers are drawn in a really similar way with similar elements, but they all look uniquely different once they're done. If you're new here, my name is Karla and I'm an artist and teacher from Ontario, here to make drawing flowers fun and approachable. And with that, let's get started. You'll need a few basic supplies, starting with some paper. I'll be using some cold pressed watercolor paper for this. Next, you'll want to have a sketching pencil, a fine tip black pen like the Sakura of America Micron pen. I'll be using a size 03. And you'll also want a good quality eraser like this kneadable one here. Okay, so let's just start right away with the draft for our first flower, the Feverfew. I'm drawing some really simple shapes to map out where I want the elements of the flower to be, like these 3 big circles which will become the blooms, and a quick sketch of the stems and leaves. Nothing fancy in this step. Now I want you to grab your pen and let's start drawing the stamen or center of the first bloom by filling in this smaller circle with a ton of teeny tiny circles. This is going to be the starting point for all of the flowers that we draw today. It's just such a simple way to draw the stamen that ends up looking really fantastic once all the other parts of the drawing come together. Keep layering these tiny circles together to fill in the whole center of the 3 blooms here. Notice that on 2 of them I made the overall shape a bit more oval. This is because these 2 flowers will end up being on a bit of a slant, and it will help create the look of it being on an angle or a slant. So now that the centers are done, we can start working on the petals. Feverfew have really short, almost stout petals with little ripples along the top edges. So just wiggle your pen a little bit while you draw them to create a bit of texture along the top edges. I'm going to keep drawing them all the way around the centers until it's filled in. For the bottom bloom, I'm going to add an extra line along the petals that are on the bottom half to create the look like they're curved upwards. And for the top right angled bloom, keep the petals on the back side shorter to make it look like they're behind and curved away from the center of the flower. Okay, so the next thing that we can do here is outline the stems with some curved parallel lines that come together at the bottom, and then let's add the main vein of this big leaf here. Now we can outline the leaves with the curved, slightly jagged outer edges by just wiggling the pen a bit while you draw. Then, to fill in the leaves, just add a row of angled parallel lines along either side of the vein. Once the leaves are done, let's just add a couple detail lines to the petals by drawing some quick light lines concentrated toward the center of each of the Feverfew blooms. Notice that I'm only adding a couple lines and not using any back and forth movements. I want to keep the details here really crisp and simple. Okay, so I'm going to erase the pencil lines and we're done with our first flower. Now we're going to move on to our second bloom, and I want you to notice how I'm taking many of these same elements we just drew, but tweaking them a little bit to make an entirely different flower. So let's start drawing this chamomile flower with a light sketch of 2 circle shapes with smaller circles in the center for where the stamen is. One is going to be on more of an angle, so I offset the center. Map out where you want your stems and leaves, and then we can dive in with pen. We're going to start drawing this in the exact same way with the teeny tiny circles for the center of the flower. Keep layering the circles together until the whole stamen is filled in. Notice how on the flowers on the right side I kept the bottom half a little more flat with a subtle curve compared with the flower on the left? This will help it appear on an angled side view. Okay, so let's start drawing the petals. These petals are a bit longer than the Feverfew petals, so let's just come in and fill the whole bottom with petals. Keep the tips with a slight pointed shape and make sure they all connect back to the center. Take a look at how I'm drawing the petals for the second chamomile flower, with the same shapes as the first, but having a couple petals toward the back that you can only see a bit of. Now we can outline the stem and the leaves, again with a vein running down each of the leaves and a jagged outer edge. Once we have the outlines done, we can come in and add a few quick details. For these leaves, I want to give them a bit of a different look, so I'm going to add some detail lines that start at the center vein and extend outward toward the outer edge, but I won't have them quite touching the edge. This little bit of white space will help add dimension within the leaves. Now for the petals, just concentrate some quick, light detail lines toward the center or bottom of each petal, again to help create some depth. Keep things simple here, don't overthink the placement of your lines or worry too much about how they look. Once they're all in place, it'll come together beautifully, I promise you. Okay, so let's take these same steps but apply them on a bigger scale with a bigger bloom, the dogwood flower. I'm doing a light sketch of the general shape of the flower with 4 large, almost heart-shaped petals and a couple of leaves peeking out from behind. Now I'm going to grab my pen and start drawing the center of the dogwood bloom in, you guessed it, the exact same way we drew the Feverfew and the chamomile blooms. Layer those teeny circles together until you have the entire circle filled in, and then we can outline the petals. You'll notice that the petals all have a little dip in them, so I'm going to come in and add an extra line along this dip to show that the petals slightly folded here. Okay, so we're ready to start adding some detail lines. These petals are a bit bigger, so you can carry your line work out a bit more through the body of each petal. Just draw a few broken lines for each petal or add a couple lines toward the middle or top to help create a curved look to each petal. Keep the lines mostly concentrated toward the center still, though, as this will help create that depth that we're after, with a bit of a shadow toward the base of each petal. We can also add some quick lines to the leaves here in a similar way to what we did for the other two flowers. If you want to stop your lines before they hit the outer edges of the leaves, you'll create a bit of white space, which will make the leaf look like it has a bit of a curve, but you can totally play around with your lines and see what you like best. Okay, so I'm going to erase my pencil lines here and then move on to a really simple flower to draw some little flax flowers. Let's move on to drafting out the flax flowers. I know it isn't super easy to see the light pencil lines on camera, so I'm not spending much time on these rough drafts. Really, if you want to skip this step and just dive in with pen, I say go for it. Big surprise here, we're going to draw the center with just a couple of these teeny tiny little circles, the same way we've been doing before, but this time, instead of adding them close together, we're just going to draw maybe 6 or 7 of them. Flax are a little 5-petal flower that have petals with dips similar to the subtle heart-shaped petals we just created for the dogwood. Let's add in some of those elongated diamond-shaped leaves and add a bit of detail. Just add a few quick lines toward the base of each leaf. Then, let's come in and add some detail lines to the petals like we've done previously, concentrating the bulk of the lines toward the center of the flower. Once we have our lines erased, our little flax flowers are done and we can move on to drawing a lemon queen bloom. I love these flowers. They grow wild around my house on the trails in the late summer and they're just so pretty. And here we go with another shocker. We're going to start this flower off in the exact same way with the teeny tiny circles to fill in the stamen. I hope that by now you're noticing a trend. Once we have these circles all filled in for the stamen, we can add an outline for the petals and leaves. Feel free to add a few dips or ridges to your petals. They don't need to be perfectly curved. For the detail lines in the leaves, just draw some lines running up the length of the leaf toward the tip. Again, if you do leave a bit of white space here and there, it'll help add that dimension to the drawing that we're after. Keep the lines in the leaves a bit closer together than the petals, and this way they'll appear darker and you'll have a bit more contrast within your drawing. Next, let's come in and start adding our detail lines to the petals, again concentrating toward the center of each petal. Because these petals are a bit bigger, you can have some fun adding a few stray lines or carrying some of your lines up to the entire length of the petal. Play around and see what you like. Try to keep most of your lines concentrated toward the center or a stamen of the lemon queen bloom. Alright, let's grab our eraser and get rid of these pencil lines, and then we're on to our sixth and final flower, which we'll draw in a similar way, the wild rose. We'll start here with a light sketch to map out the general shape of what we want. I have a large circle for the size of the bloom, and I've come in and drawn two smaller circles, this time in the center instead of just one, and you'll see why in just a minute. The 5 petals of wild rose have dips similar to how we drew the dogwood blooms, so I'm just adding a light sketch of where I want the petals to be. Okay, so I've got my pen, and now I'm starting to draw this flower in the same way as I started all of the others, with little circles filling up the center stamen. I'll keep layering the circles together until the full circle is filled. And then I'm going to come into the second circle I drew here and start tracing over it with some oval shapes in a ring around the stamen. Once this second layer of circles is in place, add in the petals. Remember to keep that little dip in the top when you're drawing them. Once the petals are where they need to be, let's connect our ovals back to the centers with a line. These are the anthers that hold the pollen, and they're connected to the stamen with the filament, which is the lines we're drawing. Okay, so let's outline the leaves now, starting with the main vein that runs down each leaf, and then we can come in and outline the outer edges of the leaves with a curved line that's a bit jagged. Once the outer edges are outlined, we can start adding in the detail lines for the leaves. I'm going to draw them in a similar way to how we drew the Feverfew leaves, with parallel lines running down either side of the vein toward the outer edges. Again, nothing fancy here. Just keep adding in these lines until they're filled in, and then we can add a few quick detail lines to the petals. For the petal detail lines, just keep them quick and light, and the majority of them concentrated toward the center of the flower. I hope that I don't sound like a broken record to you at this point, but really, I do want to hammer that point home that each of these flowers were created in such a similar way, but with just a few tweaks, they all look so different. By changing up the shape of the petals or the direction of the line work in the leaves, we can make so many different flowers with the same technique. And there you have it, the wild rose. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching or drawing along with me today. I'd love to hear what you thought of today's video in the comments, or just let me know another flower that you'd like a tutorial for and I'll add it to my list of videos in the works. If you're still listening to this, thanks for being here. Until next time, bye-bye.